What up, everyone? Before we get into the show, I mistakenly say that the Cage Warriors card will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. That is not the case, even though you will hear me say it at the very beginning of the show, and then I correct myself later on. But just so you don't get bad information and fake news, what it is going to be is Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Cage Warriors 113 will commence. So I just wanted to hit that with an update before you get too far into the show and get too confused about it. That is the actual thing that's going on. Enjoy.
Entering the Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Today we are talking about Cage Warriors 113. This is going off 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. Paul Shaughnessy, who is behind the camera and will be joining us in this discussion, has told me that you can watch it on Fight Pass. Is this correct, Paul?
Yes, UFC Fight Pass, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, Dana was pumping it because he has nothing left to pump. Now he's pumping up the Cage Warriors on Saturday.
Well, I mean, all I'll say is this is something that we can bet on. Also, if you play in a state that does not have legalized gambling so far, DraftKings Sportsbook has a pool available for this Cage Warriors card. So it doesn't matter what state you're in. Sign up for DraftKings Sportsbook, the app, and just get verified. You can play in a pool. There are cash giveaways for it, despite the fact that they're free contests. In states where in West Virginia, I believe it is, you could probably bet on this card and maybe some of the other ones too. I don't have all the info on that, but I do know that the pool is available for everyone on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. We're going to be going through each of the fights and the cards, but I do want to let everyone know if you want to get some DraftKings bucks, easy way to do so. Smash the like button for the video, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and tell me, since sports is shut down and the quarantine has begun, what is the most ridiculous thing that you have bet on so far? I'm actually really curious to read the responses to this because my answer is going to be Cage Warriors because I'm going to bet on this. Yes, Paul.
Last night I saw Saul Goodwin DFS say you guys are sick for like somebody giving out some LOL DFS advice, and I was like, ooh. I should make a lineup. I 4X that shit. So thanks to Saul for telling people not to do it because I did the exact opposite. And
So
4X.
Paul's in on League of Legends right now.
All you do is 4-3 stacks. That's all you do. Find the teams that are going to win, 4-3 stacks, and then just collect the money. At least through one event, that's what it looks like to me.
I have been trying to figure out if I really want to dig into esports. It might come down to that. And maybe I'll tackle it more from betting than the actual daily fantasy side. But hey, if there's profit to be had, we might as well go full steam ahead with that. With Cage Warriors, we actually have some inside, not necessarily inside info, but we actually do know someone who knows about this stuff. But before we get to him, also, if you want to get into a draw for 100 DraftKings dollars, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, something you like about the show, and boom, you're in that draw for 100 DraftKings dollars. So Paul is behind the glass today. On the line, co-host of the Dogger Pass podcast from the Fight Network, friend of the show, after he gave us some bonanza UFC picks last week, then UFC went away. He does know himself some Cage Warriors at CJ Saftic on Twitter. It's Cody Saftic. Cody, this was the card you were born to talk about.
Yeah. Well, lucky for you guys, I spent 3 years cutting my teeth on Cage Warriors specifically. Fight Network used to carry the product back between like 2013 to 2016. And I worked them exclusively. You can even actually go and find Cage Warriors play-by-play online, provided by yours truly, where I was literally breaking down the fights as they happen for the play-by-play side of it. So I'm very, very familiar with the product. Obviously, a lot of UFC veterans coming over from Cage Warriors, the most notable one, the 2 champ Conor McGregor, but also guys like Cathal Pendred, Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts, Aisling Daly, my boy Paul McVeigh, never made the UFC, but he was a fucking Scottish legend. Obviously, Joanne Calderwood. So, the product is a very good product. As you mentioned, you said Cage Warriors 113. This is not exactly a scrub promotion. They have a UFC Fight Pass deal. They have some decent fighters on the roster. There's a few fighters on this card that could be fighting in the UFC currently. I mean, there's a few fighters on the card that do fight in the UFC currently. So it's not exactly a completely bottomed out event. There is some decent spots, but you have to tread carefully. This is not something where you have an abundance of tape. Yes, you do have lots of tape, but you don't have an abundance of tape against elite level opposition. So there's going to be a lot of variables in these fights, but looking forward to breaking them down. And I just want to say, Pat, how the mighty have fallen. A few weeks ago, nobody cares about high-end UFC picks, and now people are tuning in for Cage Warrior picks.
Yeah, well, hey, the picks are what matters at this point in time. I guess the one thing I would caution against is we've talked about a few things now, and we've had to scrap shows because of it, because we talk about it, and then like 20 minutes after we finish filming, shit gets canceled. So that's still on the table for this. Fighters could drop out. I would say that if you don't, and this was from Paul, this is a very savvy move. This doesn't go till, I'm correct in saying it's 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, right, Paul?
Correct.
Okay, so you might miss out on some good lines as we speak right now, a few days out, if you do wait until Saturday, and maybe you're good with doing that. But if you put your money into a book, I mean, a lot of the books are super trustworthy, and they will just give you your money back. But if this card doesn't necessarily get canceled, it gets postponed to a future date, you might have some problems. Paul?
Yeah, certain books have like limits on, or they'll be like, oh, there has to be like a month passes by before we get formal clearance to like void those bets. Like I've been yelling at a certain sports book for years about this type of thing. So be careful about how much you put in until you know that these fights are actually happening. Because obviously we lost like 3 fights off of the main card just this morning, really.
Yeah. So, Cody, you had mentioned to me previously off air that there's like 3 fights you really like. We're going to break down all the fights because, listen, having you talk about fights, I mean, not only is a content killer, it is, it's quite fascinating. So, and the fact that you actually know who these people are just blows my mind. Never heard of any of them. But there's like 3 or 4 fights that you actually do really like on this card.
Yeah, I like a couple of these fights for sure. And I think you pretty much nailed it when you said that the lines are going to be subject to change, and that I think if you waited until the Saturday, some of these will get blown up. So whereas, yeah, we're going to bet some 3-1 favorites here, 4-1 favorites because they're the safe plays, I do feel comfortable in parlaying them together. And I do honestly believe that they're just capped a little bit low. I feel like Paddy Pimblett and Mason Jones in particular, they're probably going to go off higher than 325 and 400 respectively. If you parlay them together, you're getting near-ish even money. And then beyond that, there's a couple other guys on the card that we can add. As far as dogs goes, and we will break down the card, it's light on dogs. However, a lot of the fights, because they're going to be, you got a slight favorite and it's a bit of a 50-50 fight, you could just play the system of betting some random dogs. I'm not one of those guys. I want to bet the guys that I feel comfortable with my money. I feel comfortable with my plays that I've, properly capped, that I've properly done this tape study on, and I feel that they're going to get the victory. So that's what I'm doing personally. But we'll break down these, all the fights, and we'll give you an honest assessment, and it's your choice to do what you want.
All right, so let's start with this fight I have pegged here. Darren Stewart, -230 versus Bartosz Fabinski, or as I will say from now on, from Punch-Out, Soda Popinski. Where are we going?
Yeah, okay. So this is honestly the biggest fight on the card, considering they're 2 UFC veterans. They're 2 notable guys in the sense that Darren Stewart's on a 2-fight winning streak. He's fought multiple times in the UFC. He's got a little bit of momentum on his side. They were both originally supposed to take on different opponents, of course, but still, at least, like, it's not technically the headliner to my knowledge currently right now, but it is the biggest fight. This one is just, I got a personal bias in it. Darren Stewart should be the obvious play. He's 220. He's capped properly. And I do believe he's got the goods to win this fight. He has struggled in the past with his takedowns, right? And that's always in the way to kind of get this guy. He's a good kickboxer. The dentist Stewart. You want to grind up this guy. You want to clinch up with him. You want to take him down. He's got okay cardio, but not great cardio. But once you just zap his energy out and just make this a clinch battle, that's what tires him out. However, the guy's made a lot of improvements. It starts with his fight against Eric Spicely 5 fights ago, where he's the underdog coming in. Paul and I were actually on him. He was 0-3 in the UFC because of his grappling deficiencies. Paul actually nailed like a 7-1 prop bet on this Julian Marquez to submit him. And it was like, he wasn't the last to talk to the UFC. Yeah, there you go. 11-1. It wasn't like he was the joke of the UFC, but like, this guy's on a terrible run, and he's certainly on his way out. He's dogman against Spicely. We pick him in Spicely because he was at home, and we figured Spicely would probably run out of gas first, and he did. But then after that, Charles Byrd. Charles Byrd's a grappler. Charles Byrd tried to grapple him, but he prevailed. He knocks him out. Edmund Shabazian now looks like a world beater, future world contender, but he looked very, very mediocre in scoring a split decision over Darren Stewart. And then Darren Stewart faces his 2 toughest fights. But Vaughn Lewis is a straight grappler. He's basically just going to hold you up against the cage, try to take you down. It's exactly what Stewart used to struggle against. But he ends up beating Vaughn Lewis. Then he gets Deron Winn. Deron Winn is going to do the exact same thing to him, but he beats Deron Winn. Now he's actually training for Marvin Vettori. And honestly, Marvin Vettori fights a lot differently than those guys, but the game plan was probably going to be similar. Strike in spots, but try to take this guy down. So I have no doubt that Darren Stewart's been working on his takedown defense for this camp, as he's been working for all of the fights. And that's going to play extremely well against Bartosz Fabinski, who is so unbelievably one-dimensional with his wrestling game. But all Stewart has to do is stuff a couple takedowns. Bartosz cannot strike to save his life. His last fight against Michel Pereira, Michel Pereira, sorry, he actually did get chin checked, got hurt, fell to the ground. On his way back up, he gets mounted. On his way powering back up recklessly, he gets snared in a choke and ends up being submitted. However, this is where my bias comes in. As obvious as it sounds, with like, oh man, Darren Stewart, there's your guy. He's shored up his deficiencies. He's going to beat this guy standing up. He's got to fight in his own backyard in the sense that, you know, he's British, it's in the UK, versus the Polish fighter in Fabinski. It's that Bartosz Fabinski is my boy. For as limited as this guy is, Pat, he has been a money maker for me. Outside of, I guess, yeah, he did lose his last fight, but he sticks to the game plan. He goes in there. He does not look to do anything but hold you against the cage, peel you to the ground, and outpower you. He is extremely, extremely strong. And because he has that one-dimensional game plan, that's what makes him a live underdog in the spot, is that there's not going to be a live crowd there. So if this guy's clinging on to Darren Stewart for 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes of the round, and Darren Stewart's doing these rallies where he stuffs a few takedowns and he lands a few punches, that raucous crowd's not going to be there to get behind him. And without that, maybe it's not going to persuade the judges. Maybe they're going to look at, geez, one guy's been controlling the majority of these rounds. It's pretty quiet in here. We're going to go with actual work. And all Bartosz does is work. Yes, he did lose his last fight when he got caught in that guillotine choke. However, it's important to note that he gets rocked by the left hand, like he floors over, the overhand right floors him. However, he gets his wits right away. And you see he just overpowers. He's just trying to power to get back up. But one has to wonder, if he didn't get caught in that submission, would he have just popped back up and been classic Bartosz? Now, classic Bartosz has fought the worst guys in the UFC. He beat Gareth McClellan, who's an EFC Africa veteran, South Africa fighter, just not good. You know, former rugby player. Hector Urbina, Paul can tell you all about
Worst
Funky
place.
Urbina. Probably, yeah, absolutely, bottom end, worst guy in the UFC. And then Emil Weber-Meek is not terrible. However, he can't wrestle. So, yeah, Bartosz absolutely ragdolls the guy, but that's to be expected. Darren Stewart's shown us that he can wrestle a little bit more. So, again, this is a card that a lot of the favorites do look like good favorites. However, I'm going to pencil in Bartosz Fabinski. I'm not going to go big on it. It's going to be a small little action play. But if I was to throw him on some type of punt parlay with a couple of big favorites, then he's going to juice that up increasingly. And if I do put a little bit of money on just a straight Bartosz bet, then I think that's not the worst thing. It's not that Darren Stewart shouldn't be the favorite. I do agree with that. But maybe it's an issue of Vaughn Lewis got exposed. Turns out the guy's just really not that good. And Deron Winn, fuck, man, God got exposed. Turns out really wasn't that good. Now, I can't take anything away from Stewart. He made those guys look bad. So there is something there. However, maybe Bartosz comes in with a different game plan, well prepared. He's been off for like 16 months or something. So, yeah, there's some ring rust there, but he's also shake the cobwebs. And if he's in good shape, you know, coming in at some decent dog money, I'm more favoring Bartosz Fabinski, to be honest.
You had me really worried there for a bit when you were saying all those nice things about Darren Stewart. I thought you were going to go against your boy Bartosz. Yeah, I think this fight is it's dog or pass.
Yeah, fair.
To
very,
me.
very
like,
fair. You could pass on
you
this
brought
one
up a
as
good,
well, just as easy.
You brought up a good point about the crowd and the fact that, the fact that there is no crowd. If this was in front of 20,000 fans, it'd probably be hard for him to just, you know, lay and pray, wall installed, like what Bartosz Fabinski does in general. But that probably won't be as effective in this type of environment. And yeah, at least I know with Bartosz what he's going to do. He's going to go there. He's just going to shoot takedowns. And if those don't work, he's going to get hurt. But yeah, he'll stick to the game plan. That's all you can really ask for from a plus 200 underdog.
So, Cody, you mentioned like throwing this onto like the back end of a parlay. I think I'd rather just bet this one outright at plus 200, get 2-1 on my money. And if we're going to construct a parlay with some of the bigger favorites, try to limit as much as possible.
Yeah. And again, like if I was going to put it in some type of parlay piece, for example, I would put my most trusted fighter on the card parlay with my second most trusted fighter on the card. And I'm going to have a little parlay with my third most trusted fighter on the card. But then when I have, my punt one on there, you know what? I'm going to throw one dog or maybe a 4-fight parlay. I'm looking at Bartos. In comparison to the other underdogs on the card, I feel like Paul mentioned the best thing here, right? We know exactly what Bartos is going to do. Now, keep in mind that this is a card with a lot of regional show veterans who you don't know what they're going to do. Some of them can strike a little bit. Some of them can grapple a little bit. Some of them haven't been deep into rounds. Some of them have fought limited competition. It's a hard gauge of, is this guy could win the fight with his grappling. He could win the fight with his submission game, but I don't know that he's going to rely on that. Fabinski, there's no question marks there. Whereas Darren Stewart, yeah, he's going to try to do what he's been doing, which is stuff the takedown and outstrike these guys. But Deron Wynn takes him down 5 times. Thing is, Deron Wynn can't hold him down. Bevon Lewis it's a split decision win over Bevon Lewis. Bevon has spots. Problem is he couldn't keep up with it, right? Whereas Bartos, his spots to shine are those exact same spots, only he's given us every indication that he keeps chugging along. 33 years old, 16-month layoff. That's what makes me a little bit worried. But they're giving you more than enough value to just push that aside here and make at least a small stab.
All right, next fight has Mason Jones. He's minus 400 against Joe McColgon. He is plus 300. And when you were kind of initially saying this, you like Jones at the minus 400 number?
Yeah, I like Mason Jones at minus 400. I would say he's probably one of a very few guys on this card that could probably just be fighting in the UFC right now. I enjoy that he's not currently fighting in the UFC because he does need a little bit of time to shore up a couple of issues in his game. He's still only 24 years old, and he's still a little bit hittable standing. But this valuable experience that he's going to draw in the regional scene prior to going to the UFC, he'll be one of those guys that jumps to the UFC and doesn't just flame out quick. He should be one of those guys that go to the UFC, continues that trend upwards, and maybe factors in down the road a little bit. He is a little bit pricey. I laid money on him at 390. He's 410 currently, according to my book.
I'm looking at my book right now. When we started the show, he was minus 400. Now he's minus 380.
Okay, so there you go, minus 380, even better price tag. I'm not going to say that makes me worry that money's coming out of McLaughlin. I also look at it like Mason Jones is the biggest favorite on the card, and people are just looking to maybe fade the favorite on something like that. They don't believe that the price tag's there. But this is for the vacant lightweight title. Mason Jones was supposed to be in the spot legitimately. He's, like I said, he's probably the number one contender for the title. He's defeated all the other former contenders. The fight that we'll get to after is Paddy Pimblett. That's also at 155. That might generate the number one contender, let's say. But Mason Jones has set himself up in a really nice little spot. Now getting why I like this kid in what he's doing to develop himself. But anyways, like I was mentioning, he's only 24 years old, but he starts training martial arts. He's 7 years old, right? And this is a kid that his parents put him in at all. He's not taking like traditional karate or anything like that. They put him in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They put him in judo. They put him in kickboxing. Even though he's only 24 years old, he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a black belt in judo. And he's a black belt in kickboxing. But take that with a grain of salt. I don't know what the fuck a black belt in kickboxing is. I wasn't on the impression they handed out belts in kickboxing. However, that is a Brazilian thing. You do see like belts in Muay Thai. I have seen belts in kickboxing. However, I don't get it. When you do see him though, Patty, he's very good at blending all these different skills together. Now, when I say, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and he's a judo black belt, it's like, okay, is he any good at this stuff? He's been doing it since he's 7. Is he one of those kids that got a black belt when he's 11 years old? He was actually the Commonwealth Games alternate, right? Didn't make the team, but still, he was the alternate in judo, right? So he's competed at a high enough level. The guy knows what he's doing, right? Now, even though the guy can grapple, he's got jiu-jitsu, and he's got the judo black belt, and he's been doing kickboxing, he doesn't jump into MMA right off the bat. He actually goes pro in boxing, went 3-0 in pro boxing in 2016, and then switches to MMA. Only 22 years old, 3-0 in pro boxing. And since then, dude, he's gone 8-0. He's won all of his fights. You watch this guy. He gets increasingly better every time. Yes, the judo's there, but man, he's got a nasty suplex on him. He's just got a way to slink you off, get to your back. From there, he peels you to the ground. He bops you up. Now, the boxing's still there. And because of his kickboxing background, he's got good kicks. He'll throw spinning back kicks to the body. Like he's a little bit flashy, but he's also fundamentally sound with his hands. I did mention at the top of breaking him down that he's a little bit hittable, and that's why I appreciate he's getting extra regional shows time. But at the same time, it's like he is defensively sound. Like you see him trying to parry these punches. He always keeps his right hand up. There have been a few fights where his opponent has just absolutely tried to blitz him. I'll get you the exact name here. And you know what? He gets caught with a couple shots, but it doesn't matter. Like, he persevered. He's got a good chin on him. The fight was Kapker Formella, right? Polish fighter, just absolutely comes with them, right? The announcers are saying, like, what a comeback would this be if Mason Jones recovered? But he's not all that hurt. He's composed. He ends up knocking him out, knees to the body, in the first round, end of the first round. After that, the Donovan Desme fight, he shows it all. The Alexei Matvigan fight, he shows it all. He's increasingly getting better every time out. So we got a kid here, 24 years old. He's got all the skills in the world. He's undefeated. He's fighting for his first. It's a version of a world title. It's mostly European talent. So Cage Warriors, to me, is not a world title, but it is a big enough title. It's one of those like LFA situations. You win this bad boy, you're probably getting a call up to the UFC in the not so distant future. And then he draws Joe McColgon. Okay, so what's old Joe going to do to put a stop to this? Well, Joe's kind of like the polar opposite. He's 34 years old. He's not that up-and-coming kid that's going to make it to the UFC and win some fights. He's basically got a job here, which is defend these young kids on the regional show scene. And if he was to string a good enough fight record together, maybe gets a call up as a short notice replacement in the UFC in a very, very unfavorable matchup, only because it happens to be taking place in his backyard. He actually does have an amateur career. He started fighting amateur, but again, Pat, he was fighting amateur 10 years ago. He goes 6-2 over a 4-year stretch. So it was a decent amateur career. And then since then, I'm not fully understanding, but he'll win, right? He's got a couple decent wins. They call him the SBG Hunter because he had some success over SBG Ireland Jim. Most notably, he beat Peter Queally. But again, it's like he doesn't look all that outstanding, right? And this is the biggest thing, is that he's tall for the lightweight limit. He's like 6 feet tall. He's kind of a tall guy. He throws all of his punches super wide and loopy. I think that's he doesn't really know how to use his range. He's not a jab fighter. He's not a 1-2 straight right down the pipe guy. It's that he's a tall guy, and as a result, he throws those punches loopy. And then the biggest thing here is that he has very, very poor takedown defense. And I just think it's an honest recipe for disaster against a guy of the caliber of Mason Jones, who, again, is an up-and-comer. However, his takedowns, far too good for this guy. McColgon is going to be taken down. I feel very comfortable with saying McColgon is not going to be able to stuff these takedowns. But beyond that, those loopy punches standing won't have as much success against a guy who's sharp and linear like Mason Jones and should be able to just intercept him in the pocket, hit him. Mason Jones's chin has proven to be, good. He's taken some shots. He's weathered them pretty well. I'm comfortable saying I don't see no flash knockout happening here. His jiu-jitsu, geez, you know what? Black belt has been in no positions. He's been in some crazy grappling matches, and you know what I mean? Like, he defends all the submissions. So I feel comfortable with saying that McLaughlin's best path to victory here is to outpoint this kid in a 3-round fight. Well, that's his problem. It's a 5-round fight. And so he wasn't supposed to be in the spot, right? And I think he's stepping up to the plate, taking on Mason Jones, who they've got all the credentials and skills in the world. It is 380, what you're saying on your book, but I think it's capped pretty appropriately. And then I do see that line doesn't stay 380 or keep coming down. I think it goes the other way. I think it gets back up to 410. I think it gets back up to 450. And by come fight time, I wouldn't be surprised to see the line touch 500.
All right, David Bear, minus 150. Nathan Jones, a lot of Joneses on this card, plus 130. Dog, pass, or do you like the favorite?
I like the favorite here, David Bear, minus 170. So, again, I'd love to just dig really deep into this one. But Nathan Jones, he's kind of been a bit of a spoiler in his career. Most notably, I mean, he does come in with a 12-9 record. So, not exactly the most spectacular record going. And, 13-9. But also just like he does have a lot of fights, but he's most notable. He took on a fighter by the name of Walter Gardaza, who was like 16-0 way back in the day. Everybody knew how overrated Walter was. It was just like, who's going to step up and be the one to beat Walter? Don't you know? Old Mr. Bag and Tag, Nathan Jones, gets the job done, split decision, picks it up, wins his next fight for Bellator. Picks up a nice win over Walter, goes out, signs a Bellator contract, and then he loses 4 in a row. There's the thing with Nathan Jones, is that, again, he's 13-9. He's had a lot of experience. He seems to be like a decent striker. He's athletic on his feet. He's dynamic on his feet. I think that I'd give him a slight advantage as far as the stand-up goes. But again, after like his biggest career moments, the win over Walter Gahazada and then his one win in Bellator, he did lose 4 in a row, and he has actually shown that it's his grappling that's kind of getting him into trouble. You can take this guy down, you can control him, you can take his back, you can submit him. Over the course of that 4-fight losing streak, he did lose 2 by submission, and the Alex Lowry fight, he got control for the most part. When he does win, Pat, I mean, he can win, but it has to be like a generally low level of competition similar to himself. His last win over Martin Harris, 4-4, fight over Brad Wheeler. Brad Wheeler is 17-12. Well-traveled guy, but he's kind of on the back end there, right? He was initially supposed to take Hakan Foss on in this spot, and Hakan Foss would have been the obvious favorite, but Hakan Foss is very limited. Now he gets a completely different opponent in David Baer. David Baer has that grappling to give him trouble. He's 6'1", which is a decent size for the weight class. And honestly, I mean, if you look at his record, this is his bread and butter. He's got 1 win by knockout, 5 wins by submission. He wants to get this fight to the ground. He wants to submit you. His lone loss, which is Jarrah Hussein Al-Sawal, which was in Brave Combat 10, he's doing a good job. He gets caught in triangle choke. If you look at Jarrah's gone on to have a very exceptional career since then. So this kid's once beaten, 29 years old. He's 8-1. His one loss is to a very legitimate guy. And he's got all the grappling in the world. Nathan Jones, meanwhile, I mean, he's 13-9. When he fights up-and-coming prospects, when he fights guys that got a little bit of merit that are on the way up, that's when he's struggling. When he takes on journeyman back-enders like himself, he's still very competitive. He can still beat those guys. It's just he's never been able to step up and take out that rising prospect. The one win over Walter, but Walter was a total fraud. So I feel like old Mr. Bag Tag Nathan Jones is there to do his job. He's going to give him some rounds. He's going to test this kid. But ultimately, that's what he's there for. He's going to try to stuff a few takedowns. He's going to try to survive. But David Baer, once he does get the fight to the ground, it should be his. Minus 170, I don't think it's a bad price tag. I could see myself definitely having some David Baer on some lineups, or not lineups for DraftKings, but I could see myself putting some small money on him. But again, a very smart pass here would just be to pass altogether, because they are limited guys on their way up that you don't know a ton about. But I've been enough impressed with David Baer to say that at minus 170, I think he gets the job done.
What would be a better price if you wanted to bet David Baer? Let's say I'm looking at it right now and I see minus 150. Is that a better price? I mean, it is a better price, but is that like intriguing to you?
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, if I said that at minus 170, I think that it wasn't the worst thing in the world. But minus 150 is even better. I mean, if you're going to get him for minus 150, I think it's playable. It's how much confidence do you have in these guys, right? I think when we talked about Mason Jones there, I've got confidence in Mason Jones. When I talked about Bartosz Fabinski, geez, you know what? Don't have a ton of confidence in him, but we're getting a very good price on him. David Baer, I got some confidence in this guy. I honestly do think that he's got the path here. But with everything that's happening, and this guy, you don't know how his camp's been going. You don't know how the cornerman situation's been going. You don't know where the mindset's been going. He is still young in his career. He hasn't fought the greatest level of competition yet. And so it is a risky play, or a risky proposition. Minus 150, though, certainly better than a minus 170. And as far as myself personally goes, I would play David Baer at minus 150.
Okay, next fight, Paddy Pimblett against Decky Dalton. This seems like a real British fighter. These guys like Irish versus British. Is that what we're looking at here?
Decky Dalton doesn't look like he's seen the sun in months.
Decky Dalton looks like he is the same skin tone as this like piece of paper I have in front of me.
Yeah. Decky Dalton's obviously from Ireland, and Paddy Pimblett, the Liverpoolian. So we got a little England versus Ireland matchup here.
So Paddy is minus 345, Dalton plus 260. Is this a confidence fight or a pass fight for you?
Okay, so yeah, I guess some of the lines are obviously moving in real time, but when I got Paddy earlier today, it was 320. So money's coming in on Paddy, and I think that Paddy's the obvious play here. Paddy was supposed to be in the UFC 4 years ago. Everybody loved this kid. Oh my God, the fights in Cage Warriors are so entertaining. He's a young up-and-coming prospect. The world is his oyster. He can go out and have it all. However, it was very much rushed a little bit. And I don't want to say got exposed. It's just that he got a couple tough times and tough situations, resulted in a bit of a losing skid, resulted in a bit of a lack of confidence, resulted in year-long layoff. And now he's 25 years old. He's coming off a loss, and he just really never attains that level. So anytime you're betting a guy at 320, 340, 350 now, who's I'm not going to say a busted prospect here, but hasn't looked as good as people were once touting him as, you have to wonder if that's the price tag you're getting here. People rehyping him, even though he's been coming off a long layoff. Do I really want to buy into the hype again when I've kind of seen it get dropped off a little bit? But yeah, I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt, specifically because he's taking on Decky Dalton, who is a short-nosed replacement, who it just happens to match up perfectly with Paddy. But for people who don't know what Paddy Pimblett, one huge advantage he's going to have here is that he started fighting professional at 17 years old. He made his Cage Warriors debut when he was 18 years old, and he's a 12-time Cage Warriors veteran. So he is the Cage Warriors kid. He's a master of this promotion. He is very familiar with the inner workings of it, and he was for a long time their guy, headlining shows for them. He wins the company's 145-pound title against Julian Erosa, or he defends it against Julian Erosa, a UFC veteran. Good fight. Loses it in a fight with Nad Narimani, who ended up, again, going to the UFC in a good fight. And then since then, it's like you see other guys take that big step forward in their career, and he's kind of lingered around a little bit. This is going to be his 13th time competing for Cage Warriors. It's important to note, though, after he lost the fight to Nad Narimani, he took a little bit of time off, and he moved from 145 to 155. And you see the kid, he was always listed as 5'10". One day they started saying he's 5'11". I think he's 5'10". I don't think he grew, although, I mean, he'd been fighting there since he was so young. Like, it is certainly possible. But, like, he's starting to fill out the frame a little bit. And whereas he used to be, like, I don't want to say weak, he's got a great entry on his takedown. But once he gets in on the entry, he can't muscle you to the ground. He has to rely on, like, a trip. He has to get his leg involved. He has to do something where he gets you off balance. He can't just, like, peel you to the ground. So I'm not super fond of his wrestling, but he does have ways to get the fight to the ground. When he does hit the fight to the ground, he is a BJJ black belt, a good BJJ black belt, and he's got a great way of trying to find the back. He'll try to get on top of your back, and he'll just try to make you work. When you look at some of those losses or some of those good fights, he fought Julian Erosa, again, UFC veteran, Nad Narimani, UFC veteran, and Soren Bak. Soren Bak is currently a Bellator veteran, one known for Bellator. It's like those guys are all good, and he gave them all in their own way a good fight. You know, the Erosa fight, obviously he did win, but the Nad Narimani fight, it's like he was reversing a guy that's twice as strong as him. He was having some spots of success against him. The Soren Bak fight, dude, the first round, he thrashes Soren Bak. He almost chokes him out cold with a rear naked choke in the first round. The problem is that when it got out of the first round, the game kind of fell off a little bit. But he's been to 5 rounds 3 times in his career. He's got that championship experience. He's still young at 25. Apparently, he's made a good amount of improvements in his time off. And I honestly feel like Paddy Pimblett is somebody that isn't ready for the UFC right now unless they gave him the best matchups they could. But he still will get there. He's still got that back class and that quality that eventually he will be in the UFC. Whereas you cannot say the same thing for his opponent, Decky Dalton. Decky Dalton is 37 years old. Decky Dalton, very inexplicably here, Pat, was 5-0 and just retired for 4 years. He only came back in 2016 and got back to a regular schedule. But, like, he wasn't somebody that was making a whole lot of money at this, and he wasn't somebody that was doing this full time. It was more just like a side passion for him. Returns to the sport, and then since then it's just been like it's been okay. His first loss is to Gary Morris, 8-7. It's a cut stoppage. Honestly, he probably did win the first round. The thing is that he was having all types of trouble with an 8-7 journeyman guy who swallowed his eye completely shut, and then the referee stops it. Okay, fair enough. Then after that, he goes 1-4. He's fighting in low-level promotions. He's not a Cage Warriors veteran. He doesn't fight. He had an interview. There's an interesting interview on YouTube. He's like, I'm really ready to go back to arena MMA, saying like I'm tired of fighting in like ballroom alleys and like like those really small smoker venues. Like I want to go back to arena MMA. He's not talking UFC. He's not talking Bellator. He's saying like I'd like to go to Bama or Cage Warriors. That's his aspiration. Whereas you got a kid here, the former 145-pound champ, challenged for 155 pounds, or is probably next in line anyways. He's got the grappling. He's got all of that. It's just like, oh man, it's a lot. It's a lot for Decky Dalton. So it's like, okay, well, what else is he got going against him? What else is he bringing up? Well, here's another problem, right? Whereas we talked about Paddy Pimblett and that he was very solid at 145 because of that size and that ability to wear on guys. And then at 155, he wasn't strong enough. He kind of struggles a little bit with the wrestling. Decky Dalton is a 145-pounder. Decky Dalton has never fought at 155 pounds in his entire career. He is not a 55er. The problem is that they needed somebody short notice. And Decky Dalton's that guy. Decky Dalton's been talking about getting to these arena shows. He wants in. This is his spot. Okay, perfect. Now he's got to take a tough fight against a tough guy, but this is what he asked for. And he's jumping in here. He's moving up the weight class, as we mentioned. And I honestly think that that's what's going to go against him. He's not quite big enough. When you look at him, he gives up his back entirely too easily. Like a lot of his transitions always end up with him getting his back taken. Paddy Pimblett, if there's one thing about him, he's got a knack for finding people's back. Even in bad positions, he can get on your back. So I honestly do see the fight playing out where Decky Dalton will come out swinging bombs, absolutely. Paddy Pimblett's shown to have a decent chin. Julian Erosa dropped him in the second round. Julian Erosa really hurt him with the knee to the face in the third round, but the kid took it both times. And his grappling is good enough that he can fall on his back and resort to just not taking damage and getting through the next round. Because he's got 5-round experience in his belt, if he just gets through the round, he comes back. Dalton doesn't have that same type of power, dynamic strikes as Julian Erosa, so I don't think it's going to be some type of flash knockout situation. And that really is his only path here, because he's giving up the size. Eventually, when it does become a grappling exchange, Pimblett's going to just take him down and take his back. And then the last thing I got to add on this, is Decky Dalton's here for a very specific purpose again, right? He's taking on Patty. They're saving the show. This show is absolutely falling apart. But Patty's a fan favorite, and he sells a lot of tickets for us. Even though there's no tickets being sold here, there's going to be a lot of people that are watching him online, and they've got it listed currently on my site. It's listed as the main event, despite the fact that Fabinski and Darren Stewart fight in the UFC, and there's a vacant lightweight title fight on the card. They still got Patty as still their guy. But Decky fought 13 days ago. Decky fought an absolute scrub opponent on an absolute scrub card 13 days ago. So his medicals are up to date, and he really wants the opportunity, didn't really take any damage. And honestly, Pat, as bad as that sounds, that's his only advantage. His only advantage is that Paddy Pimblett hasn't fought in over a year and has been rather inactive. Paddy Pimblett hasn't fought in like 16 or 17 months and has been inactive kind of over the last few years, despite having a few fights here and there. And this guy just fought 13 days ago. That's the only advantage. That one guy just did it, and one guy hasn't done it in a while. But outside of that, Patty's got the rest of the tools. And then I think he puts them together and he gets the win over Decky Dalton. You look at all of Decky Dalton's losses, and I mean all of his losses, he gives up his back. You look at Decky Dalton's wins, most of them he gives up his back. He gets through the situation. Patty's not going to give him that chance. So Patty's a play. Again, I had it at 320. You said it's 340 now. And I thought personally, Patty would get to minus 400 at least. Mason Jones would get to minus 500 at least. It looks like I'm wrong on one. Jones is coming down. Patty's going up.
All right, so let's just talk. That's the entire main card, right?
Yeah.
Those 4 fights. So we can do a few different things here. We can put the 2 guys that you like together. I mean, you can bet them just individually, but it's going to be minus 380 and minus 340. If you put together Mason Jones and Patty, and Patty, we get to minus 160 on a 2-fight parlay. Or you like that guy, or you like David Bear, you can just bet him solo at minus 150, or you throw him onto it, and all of a sudden you get plus 175 if those 3 fights hit. Now, you talked about Fabinski as well. He's just plus 190. I mean, you could throw him onto it and make it a 7-1 parlay, or just bet him at basically 2-1 to begin with. What do you think the best route for constructing a parlay is there?
Well, personally, the route I went is just like you mentioned. I went Paddy Pimblett and Mason Jones on a 2-fight parlay, got 160, good enough price tag. Actually, I got a slightly better price tag, but that doesn't matter. If you hop on it now, 160 still a good price tag. And then from there, it's like, okay, what other fights do we like immediately? The Bartos-Fabinski fight, okay, we know that one's going to be our underdog, bit of a punt. We know what we're getting ourselves into, but we wanted one dog just for shits and giggles anyways. David Bear, okay, the minus 150, not bad. Again, though, not fully sold on David Bear. Looking elsewhere on the card, there's 2 more fights that are slightly more intriguing. There's James Hendin. He currently is a big favorite. I think he's minus 320. He's taking on Chris Edwards. Hendin's 4-0. He has looked pretty decent in the 4 fights that he's had so far. He also had a pretty decent amateur career that saw him go 7-2, right? Those 7-2, the 2 losses are actually guys that ended up going on. And he got a lot of amateur experience. I mean, he's got 9 fights right there as an amateur. He turns pro. He's been fighting for Cage Warriors. They got him signed an exclusive deal. They've been up in the level of competition, and he's been winning that level of competition. His opponent, Chris Edwards, again, he's another one of these journeyman type opponents. He's 13 wins, 11 losses. He's 1-2 over his last 3 fights. And to be honest, they've matched him up with a couple of these up-and-coming prospects like Aiden Steven and Brian Boulan, and he hasn't been able to get through those guys. When they match him up against maybe slightly lower level, he's decent, right? So he got the advantage that he's got 25 fights over a kid that's 4-0. And I feel like that's one of the big misconceptions here, is that because Hendin has actually got 9 amateur fights, he's a lot more experienced than that suggests. I mean, it's realistically a guy that's got 24 fights versus a guy that's got 15 fights. And from the 15 fights that we've seen from him, again, he's undefeated as a pro. He's been making improvements. He's been increasingly taking on tougher guys against Chris Edwards, who I think is going to be a little bit outgunned here. I'm not super confident in the play, but I think James Hendin's got some merit. The one, though, that I like a little bit better than that is Aiden Steven. Aiden Steven's minus 200 currently, or it was something like minus 196.
I see
I
minus
think this one's just right
165.
place. Well, there you go. So
There you go.
maybe it's coming down on him. It looks, at least on Topology, they got it listed as like the first fight on the card. What I do find fascinating about this Aiden Steven fight is that I have seen him compete a couple times, and I wasn't overly I was impressed. I was impressed enough, right? If you look at guys that are just on this card already, right? We just talked about Chris Edwards, right? Chris Edwards was 13-11. He's the journeyman that we don't really like against Hendin. Well, Stephen Aiden fought Chris Edwards, and he submitted him with a Kimura in the second round. Very nice performance. He also fought Kingsley Crawford. Kingsley Crawford's on this card. Decent up-and-comer. Not great, but I mean, an up-and-comer who is, again, on this card. Aiden Stephen also defeated him, and he took on Steve Aimable. And Steve Aimable is on this card, and his last fight was Mads Burnell. Fight that went the distance, actually. Mads Burnell, UFC veteran, decent enough. So he's got experience at this level against these top-flight guys. He lost his last fight, yes, but against Aimable, who's really not all that bad. He's another guy that we could talk about a little bit. But the reason why I say right place, right time is that even though he's coming off a loss, this kid's on a little bit of a run right now. He has looked pretty good. And they originally booked him in a fight against this guy by the name of Emre Somnes, right? Emre Somnes is known as the Anatolian Wolf. He's 11-2. He's on a nice little run right now. This was going to be a nice little prospect versus prospect style clash. Obviously, because of this Corona issue, it gets canceled. And then comes in Jack Collins, right? Jack Collins is 3-0. So again, to the naked eye, it's like, you know what? We got a guy that's 6-2 against a guy that's 3-0. One guy's undefeated. Don't really know a ton about him. But it's important to note that Jack Collins in his 3-0, his opponents have been 2-0, 0-8, 0-2. He fought once as an amateur. His opponent was 1-4. So he has not fought anybody that's been at this level. Now, he fancies himself a submission guy, but as we just talked about Aiden Stevens picking up that Kimura over Chris Evans, Chris Edwards, my bad. He's got decent grappling. He himself has got a lot of submission wins. I think that he's going to be good enough to stuff out Jack Collins, and when Jack Collins doesn't have things go his way, that's not something he's used to. So I feel like Stevens is also maybe somebody that I'd be looking to have my eye on. But I think if you want to play it safe, just like you mentioned, we're going to go with our top two guys that we're most comfortable with, Paddy Pimblett,
and Mason Jones.
Mason Jones, Paddy Pimblett. Hopefully they stay at the relatively same price, but we go with them. Beyond that, I'm sitting on David Bear for 1 second. I'm going to go Aiden Stephen. Let's say I was just making a fictional longer parlay for you here. The two that we like, that's the two that you should play and then just enjoy the night. But beyond that, the third person I like the most is Aiden Stephen. And then I'm going to
then James Hendin.
James Hendin, sorry.
Hendin.
James Hendin, and then Bartosz Fabinski. Other guys on the card are like, I don't mind Steve Aimable. He was minus 150. Lewis Martin versus Kingsley Crawford's a flat pass. Matthew Bonner versus Jamie Richardson should be a flat pass. Darren Gorman versus Connor Hignett should be a flat pass. Jake Bond versus Adam, I don't even know how to pronounce that last name, should be a flat pass. The other ones I do see some merit that we can go after that. There was initially some fights that we were targeting, maybe like the Luke Shanks of the world. However, with all these fights being tossed off, it's like the fights that you didn't think you'd end up tape studying are now the ones that have odds on them. And I don't know how many books are going to release the full odds on it. However, I don't quit here. Like, I am comfortable with the plays that we've given out on the show. I feel like there is some money to be made on this card, but it's only Wednesday. Like, I will continue to search for every possible avenue or any possible edge, and you guys know exactly where to reach me. So if you have any questions at all, or if I find any other gold nuggets, we'll definitely reconvene and I'll put it up there.
Yeah, at CJ Saftic on Twitter if you have any questions about this. Or hey, listen, Cody has so few people he can just chat Cage Warriors with. So if you're big on Cage Warriors, I just looked at this too. This is actually happening on Friday, March 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Not Saturday like I think I previously said.
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, man, I thought it was on Friday. However, things have just been changed. I woke up this morning, 3 of the fights are off. So is the card happening? But apparently it is. So let's go.
I think I told Pat that.
Yeah, bad info from Paul. Although he did make the sheet with all the lines on it for me. So I mean, I think he wins out the day when it comes to Cage Warriors 113. Did you say that you didn't mind Perry Goodwin at minus 150? Was that like the sixth one that you didn't feel terrible about?
Perry Goodwin, no.
There was one other one you said.
Yeah. It's his opponent, Steve Aimable. Steve Aimable, he's got 0 submission wins, 8 knockouts, but his grappling's not that bad. His last 4 fights have all gone the distance. His last fight in particular was against Mads Burnell, who's a little bit too strong and a little bit too physical for him. In this spot, I don't see him having those exact same problems. So I didn't give it out as like hey man, let's get confident, let's jump on Diddy Kong Steve Aimable, but I do have my eye on him. The price is not that bad, and I'm going to watch some more fights. I'm very familiar with Steve. I'm not super familiar with his opponent, so that's what I got to do a little bit more research on before I was confident in saying anything about it.
All right, and he's a minus 150, so that's not terrible. So different ways you can play it, like you said, in terms of just if we want to play the card. So let's just, I mean, for even the DraftKings pick 'em pool, they just have win, lose, or draw on each of the fights to begin with. So the ones that you have the most confidence in, like you just went through, if I play them all together, and just the ones that you mentioned that said that you want to take a stand on, or at least ones that you're considering playing at this point. Where's Psycho Steve here? There, put him on there. So we have
Right here, buddy.
What's that?
So basically what I ended up doing is I was, listening to Cody. Cody's the whiz at this, did this stuff for years over at Fight Network, covering this promotion. And when he's not, at the racetrack, he's obviously watching fights from all over the world. So the guys on his list were Mason Jones, Paddy Pimblett, Aiden Steven, James Hendin, Bartosz Fabinski, David Bear, and Aimable. Aimable and Bear are kind of on the outside looking in. Fabinski's a big-time dog, so I don't know how much you want to add that to parlays. But Steven, Pimblett, Jones, Hendon, kind of another parlay piece.
So I think
Correct,
I'm gonna
Cody?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna play the
Yeah,
two.
yeah, Paul, my boy. That's why me and Paul do the show together.
I
He
mean,
takes all my thoughts and puts them into one more concise sentence. So, my man, that's what we're going.
That's a 17 parlay. That may or may not be on my account.
So
right
I have it up. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play that Jones and Patty one by itself. That's like minus 165 or something. I'll play the 4 when we add in Hendon and Steven. I might even leave Hendon off that and just use Steven because minus 320. It's not giving me a ton, but that'll get it up to around like 3-1. I think it's actually in here. I'll just do and tell you exactly what it is.
What I've got right now, I've got the 2-man parlay that Cody suggested. I did a 4-man parlay with Jones, Pimblett, Steven, and Hendon.
That pays.
And then I did the 7-man parlay.
So the 4-1 pays plus 240. The 3-1, if you take Hendon off of it, pays 162.
Yeah.
The 6-man that we talked about, taking off Soda Popinski, who's the dog. Those 6 pay 8.5 to 1. You throw him on at almost 2 to 1. All of a sudden, it becomes a 26 to 1 7-leg parlay. Probably just play all of those.
Buddy, let's get it.
I think that's what we're gonna do here. I want to have some fun on a Friday afternoon, Cody.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm in.
All right, Cody Saftic. Thanks for being on the show, man.
Hey, absolutely, man. Always my pleasure. And yeah, good luck to everybody. Let's get another repeat performance so we can stock up on supplies.
Okay, so Cody Saftic, again, at CJ Saftic on Twitter. If anything else pops up, Cody's going to let us know. At Paul Shag on Twitter for Paul Shaughnessy, who decided to stay behind the camera on this one, so we could get a lot of graphics and boards. Just easier to do this way. Hit up Paul on Twitter, at Paul Shag, the condenser of the information that you need to know.
I just want to be in on the bets.
Yeah, I want to be in on the bets. That's all anyone's fucking listening to Cage Warriors for, unless you're a big time Cage Warriors fan. So those are the bets. Also on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, regardless of the state that you're in, you can play for free. I'm looking at the contest right now. It closes at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, March 20th. There's $2,000 in a free contest up for grabs. So it's very unlikely that this one will be split. So all the 2K would be yours if you end up winning that. Cody just gave you 7 picks. You can figure out the rest on your own if you want to go that route. I highly suggest everyone play it. There's a whole bunch of new cool contests that are free to play in the pool section, regardless of the state that you live in on the DraftKings Sportsbook. So I would go check that out. I'm Pat Mayo. Follow me at the PME. I told you about the giveaways, the smashing of the thumb for the like of the video, leaving your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and then telling me the most egregious thing you've bet on so far since coronavirus has broke out and sports have stopped. But if you want to get into the big draw, the one for $100 DraftKings dollars, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Might as well download the last 7 episodes that are up there too, just for fun. Leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, something you like about the show, and you will be in that draw. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Pat Mayo, and I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!